Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to focus on risk management and looking at how we can use our Pims Risk Management tool to help us minimize threats but also exploit opportunities that arise within projects. The functionality is going to show how to take a more proactive approach to risk management, how to make sure that we are adding threats and opportunities to our risk list during the life of a project, not just at the beginning, and how to make sure we're progressing them during the life of the project. So let's get started. First off, if you're new to webinars and GoToWebinar, this is the tool that we use. If you need to ask a question during the webinar, just type it in that box you see there. Okay, hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear. You can swap between your computer speakers and a telephone if you like. Just click on the relevant button and it'll give you the instructions you need. But submit a question at any time. We've got people in the background there ready to answer them, and we'll summarize the questions at the end. So today's agenda, I'm going to introduce the team. We're going to give you a little bit of background on the company, Omega, who we are, what we do, and then we're going to spend the bulk of the time looking at risk management, how the tool helps you manage both opportunities and threats, summarize on the benefits, and then come back at the end and recap on the questions and answers that we've had during the webinar. So my name's Shane Butt. I'll be your host and presenter today. I've been with Omega for over 12 years and have implemented our Pims solutions throughout the world. Arvid Marcus is a department manager here in our office as well, and he's also been with the company for over 12 years and has been directly involved in numerous implementations of Pims products as well. So he'll be working in the background. He'll be answering as many questions as he can during the webinar. So that's who you'll be speaking to on the question side. And at the end, he'll come back in and wrap up and share the questions and answers with us. If you can't get to all of them, they will also be published on our website with the recording of this webinar afterwards. So just a quick bit of background on the company. For the last 25 years, Omega's been helping companies deliver capital projects more efficiently through our two key business streams: by providing professional consultants to help projects with additional manpower, expertise and experience, and through our software Pims product range to help with the key processes within those projects. Our heritage was based around oil and gas projects and the owner-operators initially, but over time we've expanded to focus more on the EPC sector and other industries in an effort to diversify. We're a global company with offices around the world. In addition to the multiple offices we have in Norway, we have offices in Canada, Australia, Singapore, Denmark, Sweden, Lithuania, the UK, and of course in the US. Our office in the US is based right here in Houston. Now that picture on the right hand side isn't just a Photoshop picture. That's in fact our headquarters in the lovely town of Ørnsvåg on a typically beautiful Norwegian fjord. It's a beautiful country to visit if you ever get the chance. The majority of the offices that I mentioned before are full service offices in that they provide both consulting expertise and the full range of our software services: sales, implementation, configuration, training and support. We have around 150 Pims specialists around the globe to help implement and support our solutions. We've been developing our Pims product range for over 25 years as well. In that time, the number of products has increased, the breadth of functionality has increased within them, as well as the underlying technology and infrastructure. All our software products have been developed with significant input from our vast client base. This collaborative development with our clients is one of the keys to our product development and success. We take the collaboration with clients very seriously. In many cases, we have our Pims system engineers work directly with the project teams on site. And this enables our software to be configured and adapt to the changing needs of the company and the projects over time. It also enables our Pims systems engineers to get a deeper understanding of the business, which makes them more valuable to the client, to Omega, and in their own career. One of the key things we do at Omega is we do whatever's needed to make our software your software. Now, today's focus is on risk management. And as I alluded to in the beginning, our risk management product focuses on both opportunities and threats. When I started preparing for this webinar, I wanted to focus on adding real value to the risk management process. I had a feeling that most of us just think about negative possibilities when we hear the word risk. If we're asked to perform a risk assessment, our nature is to focus on the negative things that could happen. I wanted to test this theory of mine. I had some discussions with some well-respected colleagues who have worked on projects for many years, and they confirmed my theory. They did state that there has been a move to at least identify project opportunities more recently, but not necessarily to manage and exploit them. So I did some more research, as most of us do. I went surfing the web. I checked the Merriam-Webster, Cambridge, and Wikipedia online dictionaries. And here's what they had to say about risk. And this backed up my theory, thankfully. The Merriam-Webster dictionary basically defined risk in a completely negative way. So for them, a typical example of a project risk would be, say, delays due to change in scope. What did Cambridge Dictionary have to say? Pretty much the same thing. You know, their focus on a risk for a project could be obviously delays due to bad weather or productivity being lower than expected. At least the Wikipedia dictionary was a bit more optimistic and put a silver lining around risk. It recognized the potential of gaining or losing. So this is the definition I like best, and with that, let's get started at looking at risk management within Pims. Okay, so some of the key features within Pims Risk. As I said, it's a full risk management tool, so it focuses equally on opportunities and threats. It doesn't exclude one from the other. You can in fact configure it so that you only focus on threats if that's what you want, but I feel the best value is to focus on both be able to minimize your threats and exploit and maximize your opportunities. It enables all project risks, be they threats or opportunities, to be listed, all the relevant actions you want to take to address those, to all be communicated very easily throughout your project team and in fact your whole company. It helps establish clear visibility of who the risk owners are and who's responsible for each action, when the due dates for those actions are. It also encourages use by all project members, so everybody in the team can create and insert a risk, be it a threat or an opportunity. Okay, we don't want to restrict the likelihood of risks being added to the system by having people wait for only certain people like the risk specialist to input them. Let anybody input them, but have them properly managed by the risk experts. And we monitor the history of each threat and opportunity over time. So is it moving in a direction that we'd like? For instance, in the typical threat matrix, you want to move things from red to yellow to green, obviously. And another key thing you'll see is there's a huge variety of configuration options, both available at the corporate level, so you can define the risk management product to work the way you want it to across all projects, but there are also configuration options for within a project. So if they need to do something slightly different, that's there ready to go in the configuration. So today we're going to look into Pims Risk. The demonstration is going to focus initially on opportunities and how we look to make sure that in fact the opportunities are being progressed, that they haven't just been listed and ignored. So we're going to focus on that, as well as are new opportunities being added into the system for the project over time, or is it just, hey, here was the initial list of opportunities and nothing else gets added or thought about over time? After we've covered that, then we'll focus on threats, looking at some of our proactive tools to help you manage and minimize threats, look at risk exposure, etc. Obviously, we track movement on threats and new threats at the same time, and we can be proactive on the opportunities. Okay, so here I am in my Pims Risk dashboard. We're looking at a traditional risk matrix here, where I've got red representing high risk, high danger. So this is obviously focused on threats at the moment, through to my yellow and ideally my green categories. So just a quick tour of what we're looking at here. This is my risk matrix. Okay, I've got my probability on the x-axis going from very low on the left to very high on the right, and my consequence axis on the y-axis, consequences on the y-axis going from very low at the bottom to very high. So obviously our worst threats are going to be in that top right section, top right cell, and we want to be moving and watching our risks, our threats trend towards the bottom left. Okay. Below the matrix is the full list of risks, and I can click on any of those straight from there and open up and look at more details on that particular risk. The color scheme as well, it's the traditional green, yellow, red. However, all of these things are configurable, both the matrix size, so if you want, don't want 5 by 5 matrix, you want 6 by 6, 4 by 4, that's completely within your control in the configuration options. As is the color scheme, the wording on the axis, do you want to use very low, low, medium, high, etc.? Do you have different terminology for the different probabilities? Do you want it in fact ordered a different way? We also have a number of filters that make it easy for us to look into the risk matrix for threats and opportunities. So a quick tour of that. For instance, let me look at the risks where threats, opportunities where I am the risk owner. So I have 2 threats that I own, and you can see them listed there, 0004 and 15, that's the risk ID number. And I also have 2 opportunities that I'm the owner for, but they're not showing up at the moment because I'm just looking at the threat matrix. Okay, I could also, for instance, look at the ones owned by Arvid. I can also look at risks where I am responsible for an action related to that particular risk. So that's just to give you a quick overview, but let's go focus on the opportunity matrix. All right, so here is a list of all of the opportunities. You can see a different color scheme, a bit more comforting, I would say, light blue to dark blue. So the major differences between this opportunity matrix and the threat matrix is the color scheme, and in fact the consequence axis is inverted. So on the threat matrix, very low was at the bottom going up to very high. On the opportunity matrix, we've got very low at the top to very high. So in the ideal world, we want to be moving our opportunities from sort of top left towards the bottom right. Now, again, that's just a configuration option. You can have that any way you like. So the good news is you can see we've got quite a few opportunities listed. Now let's see if they're being monitored and moving in the right direction. First off, I'm just going to look at opportunities where I am responsible for one or more actions, just to see that list. If I focus on the ones where I am the owner, I can see just two options there. Okay, but let's bring them all back. I could also have just said use these filters here where I have actions and where I am responsible. Okay, let's look and see if we've had any movement, any activity on these opportunities in the last month or so. Okay, none of the risk bubbles have moved, so I've had no movement in the last month. Okay, let's go back maybe 3 months. Let's go back to mid-June. And look, now I can see some activity. I can see, in fact, that 2 of the opportunities have progressed, and in fact they're progressing in the right direction. So opportunity 30 and 32 are both being progressed. Now that shouldn't be surprising to me, since if I filter on risk ownership, those are 2 risks that I'm responsible for. If I go back even further, let me go back towards the beginning of this project. I will see more extended progress. So I can see, in fact, that opportunity 32 originally started out as a low probability and a low consequence, and over the last 12 months or so it's progressed steadily to a high probability and a high consequence. So that's excellent. That's what we want to see. Okay, if I now remove me as the owner, okay, I have a disturbing pattern that I can see that not all of the opportunities have been progressing as we'd like. So I'm going to follow that up with the team members and in our next project meeting and get them to take some action and review their opportunities, review all of them. All right, so that's looking at how do we monitor progress on our opportunities. Now let's look at, are we getting new opportunities created? So here I am in my Pims client, and at the moment I'm looking at the same data. On the right hand side you can see the full list of risks, both threats and opportunities for my project. So the first thing I'm going to do is narrow down the list to look at opportunities. So I'm going to use my filter here and say, just give me a list of all of the opportunities. Okay, I can see that on the right hand side, and I can see the data about each opportunity on the left hand side by clicking on the relevant opportunity. Now opportunity 32 was one of those ones. You can see I'm the risk owner for it on the top left hand side, and that was one of the ones that on our web dashboard showed the most movement. So while we're here, just a quick tour of what we can see. We've got our risk owner in the top left. We've got the assessment matrix, which is the opportunity matrix because this is classified as an opportunity. On the left hand side there with the color scheme, you can see the date that the last assessment of this particular opportunity, which was July 25. And you can see some areas here where we specifically look at both the probability of this opportunity being realized. So it's currently marked as high, between 30 and 60% probable, but also the consequences from different categories. For instance, cost, schedule, health and safety, and as I've talked a lot, we have the configuration options that enable us, if you don't want to, for instance, focus on the impact of health and safety, but you want maybe to focus on environmental impact or impact on your company's reputation, they're just options behind the scenes where you tick the box, and those will either appear or disappear as needed. Okay, but now what I want to do is focus on, are new opportunities being created? So we saw some movement through our web dashboard, and we can see that is also visible here, and we'll come back to that in a while. But what I want to do is use my filters and say, have any new opportunities been created in the last 30 days? And you can see on the top right hand side, my list is empty. There have been none. If I go back a bit further, maybe 90 days. No. 180 days. So 6 months, yes, I can see at least in the last 6 months there's been one new opportunity recognized and added into the system. So this helps me see and determine, is the project team really on the lookout for new opportunities? So in addition to getting my project team at our next meeting to focus on, the existing opportunities and progressing them, moving them along, doing a new assessment, we also want to just re-emphasize that they need to have their eyes and ears open for new opportunities that we can add in and manage. All right, so I'm going to remove my filter now and just focus on, again, because I'm in the risk module, the risks that are allocated to me as the risk owner. So you can see the same ones I effectively saw before. These first two are threats and these two are opportunities. So opportunity 32, we saw that it had progressed over time from low consequence and low probability to high consequence and high probability. And in fact, in this matrix here, I can see that progress over time. I can see originally in August 2015, it was located here in the low cell. A few months later, January of this year, it moved in terms of probability to medium. A few months later, its consequence was upgraded from low to medium. And then on the last assessment date, July 25th, it moved both probability and consequence to high. So obviously that's what we want to see. Now let's look at what was some of the things happening that enabled that progress to be made. So we were looking here, our opportunity is to look for better software systems that'll help us perform the project tasks more efficiently and effectively, so that we might need less people allocated to those particular tasks. And we recognized that document control was a particular process for this project that could be streamlined and give us significant benefits. So we wanted to review the current processes for potential improvements and savings. So we created an action for that. It was allocated to Carl, and it was completed within its deadline of December last year. Subsequently, Carl published a report with his recommendations and findings in January, and that's what enabled us to increase the probability of this opportunity from low to medium. Then we published a RFP for document control software in April, and the initial feedback from that was positive. We published our recommendations, so Harvard produced the final report with the recommendation on software tools to be used, and then we're in the process of implementing that, and then a few months from now we will confirm the savings. So each time a risk assessment was done and a change was made, a risk comment was added in here. So we can see in January that the review determined there is a larger savings opportunity than originally expected, and that the RFP published that, and the responses gave us comfort that the probability of realizing those savings would increase. And in fact, the recommendations revealed greater savings and probability. So this has been the trend over time, which is exactly what we saw back on our web dashboard. with the movement of that particular opportunity over time. Here we can see there's also a related risk, which in this case is an opportunity focused on receiving vendor data earlier. Okay, now another key thing that we keep track of for opportunities and risks is what's our ultimate target consequence and probability, and what is our period of exposure or opportunity gained. And you can see in this case here we expect to gain this benefit between September of this year and November of next year. So we'll come back to that a bit later. Another opportunity that we had was to look at changes in exchange rates and see were there any things happening globally that might impact that. And yes, in fact there was. Earlier this year we had the vote in Britain or the United Kingdom where they determined they were going to exit from the EU, and that has had significant impact on exchange rates between the US and Europe. So to start to wrap up on opportunities, one of the other things I wanted to look at was our opportunity report. So I'm going to run this particular report. I'm going to focus on the opportunities that we've marked in our top 10 most important ones. I'll preview that report. And what this report is showing me is the opportunities that have been identified in our top 10, where they fit into the opportunity matrix in terms of consequence and probability, and then some details about them. What are their consequences from both a cost, schedule, and health and safety perspective, and their probabilities. So I can easily, while that report is run, I can easily email that off to a colleague as a PDF file, Excel if I want to. I can save it as PDF or Excel, or in fact an image file if I might want to include that with a corporate presentation or a project presentation on how we're going with our opportunities. So let's now start to focus on threats. We've spent some time looking at opportunities, how we can progress them, keep track. Are they moving? Are they heading in the right direction? Are new opportunities being added or not? Let's jump back and look at what we have to offer in the way of the threats. So I'm going to go back to my threat matrix. Okay, I've got the total list of threats visible to me. Okay, I'm going to focus down on ones where I'm the owner of that particular threat and look and see, have we had any movement again in the last month? No, we haven't. I'm going to go back a bit further. Have we had any movement on those since, say, the beginning of July? And yes, I can in fact see that threat 4, which is related to inadequate design and the risk that that can cause delays and additional cost, is in fact moving in the right direction. It's moved from a high probability, medium probability, to low, and the consequences also moved from medium to low. So that's heading in the direction we'd like to see. If I go back a bit further to maybe mid-May, okay, we can see threat 15 has moved in the right direction as well, and this one's related to insufficient helicopters for hurricane evacuation in the Gulf of Mexico. And if I go back towards the beginning of my project, the early days, go back to say the beginning of September last year, we can see that there's been even more progress on the inadequate design threat. Okay, so now let's come back into our Windows client and again focus on threats and opportunities. So again, we've got the threat here. Inadequate design can cause delays. You can see the history of the assessment of this particular threat. It's moved from between July 2015 through September, and now at the current point, based on its last assessment of, in fact, July the 4th of this year, it's moved into the green band, which is what we want to see. Let's do a quick look. We saw a minute ago on movement of the threats. Let's look again, same thing, threats that have been created in the last 30 days. Yes, there's one there. If I go back 180 days, I've had 2 created. So, you know, this is confirming my theory on human nature, that they think more, that the team thinks more about the negative risks, the threats, not as much on the opportunity side. So they're adding new ones there. Okay, let's look back at, again, just the ones that I'm responsible for, and let's look a little bit about this inadequate design one. What's happened to that? So experience has told us that it's a common issue with certain contractors, that they're going to challenge us. So we had set an action to meet with the vendors and set expectations early on in the piece. So we did that in August, and that task was completed and led to our reassessment and our change in probability and consequence in the positive direction. And then we set up a task to review the performance of the vendor after 3 months and track and make sure that was still happening the way we wanted to. That was completed by Nathan and led to another improvement and through the risk reassessment. So this threat is trending the way we want. And in fact, it's really hit what we expected was our target consequence and target probability. So we can mark this risk, this threat off as now being as low as reasonably practical. And we can filter on that as well, just like we can filter on target consequences. We talked about filtering on the top 10 with that report. Okay, if something had changed and I now had some more concern, in fact, that the probability was increasing of delays in design, I can just increase my probability here, save this assessment, and it will move the particular marker to the relevant location. While I'm here, this logic is looking at what is the probability combined with the highest of my consequences from the key impact areas that I'm measuring, in this case cost, schedule, and health and safety. But if I want to, I can say, okay, just show me the change in cost over time. So you can see cost started with a very high probability, went to medium, and then low. If I want to look at schedule, I can see changes there as relevant, and health and safety. So we can focus on the highest consequence for each threat and opportunity combined with the probability, but we can also drill down if we want to focus, say, just on cost and look at the trend and history of the cost impact on that threat. Okay, if we take a quick look at threat 15, I'm not going to make those changes. Okay, insufficient helicopters for hurricane evacuation. So our exposure to that is in the typical hurricane season here in the Gulf from the beginning of June until the end of October. So what we did was we had an action to negotiate new contracts for standby helicopters, and we wanted to complete that before the hurricane season. Arvid completed that in May of this year, and in fact that led to a reduction in the consequence from a cost point of view, as well as the probability of that having that negative impact on us. So when we saw that threat moving from our dashboard, and when we look at it here, that's the task, the action that was responsible for that improvement in the assessment of this particular threat, so the mitigation of it. Now, we talked about being proactive. We in fact have a form called Be Proactive, and it's really set up as a exception tool. So, what's gone on in my risk system that maybe I need to put some extra focus into. For instance, has there been a risk created but no assessment? Yes, there has. I can see this particular risk here was created recently, a threat, but there have been no assessments done yet. I can easily open that particular threat or opportunity from here, but I can also generate a quick notification message off to my colleague who's responsible for that particular risk. Okay, so it's a great way to have visibility of things that might be an issue that you want to take action on. Another example is, for instance, overdue actions. Okay, I've got a few here. I can look at the risk and send a notification to the risk owner, but I can also open the action directly from here and notify the person who's responsible for that particular action. And lastly, while I'm here, risks where the assessments have been made very close together. Okay, in this case here, they've been made less than 5 days apart. I might want to go investigate and see what was the logic for that. So a great proactive tool to help me look for exceptions and take action on those. In a similar vein, we have a report subscriptions module. And there are numerous reports for Pims Risk Management, but the beauty of this is I can set this up and enable people to subscribe to receive these reports. So the weekly risk reports are run. It includes these 2 particular reports. If I want to add another report, I just add it in, select it from the list, and it will be automatically included. And who do I want to receive these reports? So in this case, Carl and I are set up to receive these standard risk reports on a weekly basis. And we can add others in there as needed. Okay, we talked a lot about actions. Of course, there's an action list to help keep track of all actions related to our threats and opportunities. It includes the color coding that you would expect, and that's tied to the current assessment for that particular threat or opportunity. So if there were, if a particular threat was in the red zone, the action for that would be highlighted here in red. Okay. What I'm going to do first, make sure I'm not looking at my cancelled or closed ones. If I bring them in, you'll see the list of actions is greater. I'll start with that, and I'll say, show me any actions for risks where I am the owner. I can do the same where I am the person responsible for that particular action. Okay, but at this stage, my focus is overdue actions or current actions. They may be overdue or they may not be, where they're tied to risks that I am the owner for. So I've got the list there, and what I can easily do is just produce a report that takes that filtering into account. There's the list, and I can email that off to the relevant people and ask them to keep on top of those particular actions. Now, we talked a little bit about risk exposure, so let's have a look at what we've got here. We've got our risk plan, which is showing the exposure of our threats and opportunities over the course of the project. And again, using the same color coding to highlight threats versus opportunities and effectively the severity of those. So while I'm here, let's focus on those that I'm the owner for. Okay, there's my 2 threats, the inadequate design and the insufficient helicopter access. And you can see it's depicting the period of time that was relevant that I had against that particular threat from the start to the end date of the exposure. And I've got the same things here for my opportunities. Now, one of the things every project manager needs is to be able to produce reports and look at what are the key things, key risks, both threats and opportunities that could impact my project. So I'm going to open up my risk report. I'm going to filter that on to highlight those that are in my top 10. And here's my report. I can see both my threat matrix and my opportunity matrix, the same color coding you saw all along, where those particular threats and opportunities are currently located in the matrix, and some details about them. Their ID, the title, cost and schedule impact, the probability that these will occur, and the ratings of both the cost elements, the schedule elements, and the health and safety. Okay, and as we talked about before, where it shows up in the consequence axis is governed by the highest of those particular consequences. Now, it's all well and good that I can produce that report. I can save it as a PDF, as we talked about before, email it off. I can save this as an image file and include it in a presentation. But even better, this report can be automatically included with the project's monthly status report for greater visibility of all of the key top threats and opportunities. All right, that's our tour of Pims Risk. So now let's come back to our presentation, wrap up with some of the key benefits, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So key benefits from Pims Risk, and this is really in comparison to other tools, because there's plenty of tools out there, even Excel spreadsheets are managing risks. We have a defined focus on both opportunities and threats, and you've seen that. You've seen how we can monitor progress on those threats and opportunities. Are there new threats and opportunities being added? Because we don't want them to just be stagnant. We want to make sure that it is being constantly reviewed and assessed. We saw how we could monitor impact on cost, schedule, health and safety, and in reality, anything we want to. We can add in reputation there, quality, environmental. That's part of the variety of configuration options we have in terms of, the color schemes, the size of your matrix, etc. One of the things we have particular focus on with some of our proactive tools is to make sure we don't end up with our project having a bottom drawer mindset. And by that I mean, at the beginning of the project, everybody gets fired up and energized and goes through and logs opportunities, hopefully, as well as threats that they're aware of. And effectively, that just sits there stagnant as if it's in the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet. So a lot of focus on proactive tools to help avoid that. We looked at the visibility in great depth for management, for the people involved in day-to-day risk management, on the opportunities, threats, who's the owner of each risk. Easy to drill down into that and enable them to focus on their area of responsibility, and the same with actions. All right, so thank you for your attention. Now I've had Arvid join me. He's been in the background looking at the incoming questions, so I'm going to hand over to him. He's going to summarize those. All of the questions that were asked and answered will be put on our website in the next few days. So Arvid, what did you get?
Thank you, Shane, and thanks for all the questions. I believe I was able to answer them all as we're going to go through the webinar. So let me do a quick recap here. One of the first was, how do you install Pims? And Pims can either be hosted in the cloud with our hosting partner, Microsoft Azure, or we can install it at your locations. Another question came in regarding the configurations, and Shane, you talked a lot about the possibility of configuring Pims Risk. And yes, you can do this configuration yourself as the risk manager or the risk super user. You don't need to have us doing the configuration for you. And another question was regarding email notification. You saw Shane setting up some report templates that was being emailed out on a schedule. In addition to that, Pims will also email out information regarding due date on actions, when new people have been added to our risk with the action and so forth. So the email notification is pretty powerful within Pims. We have one question here on is risk integrated with your cost product? And yes, it is. All our products are seamlessly integrated together and working side by side. And let's see here, I'm going through the list, and I think we have time for one more question, and it comes into are there more reports available than we saw, and can these be configured? Yes, I believe we have about 20 out-of-the-box reports within Pims for the risk management module. And all of these can be configured to fit your needs, and as well they can be exported out to Excel to further slice and dice if that's needed. I think that's what we have time for now, Shane.
All right, excellent. Thank you for joining us, Arvid. Thank you for being in the background and keeping the questions moving along. Now let's take a look at what else is happening in Omega Project Solutions. Our three most recent webinars covered using Pims workflow to help solve process and communication challenges within projects. Then in July it was how benchmarking your projects would enable you to compare projects, taking into account changes in costs and time, comparing stages within projects, and using your past project performance to help review and validate new project estimates. And last month was improving project execution by managing your project interfaces more effectively. Now, in terms of upcoming events, next week we're having our global user conference, Pims user conference in Stavanger, and in fact I'm headed that way later today. Our focus over the next few months is going to be on completions and commissioning. We're going to have a webinar on October 19 with a high-level look into the major benefits that Pims CMS can provide you. Then in November we have one of our most experienced completions and commissioning consultants coming to Houston. He's based in Norway but has many years of international experience on oil and gas projects. He has some great experiences and insights to share. He's been asked to present at the AACE Region 5 Symposium on November 5, and that's going to be held up in the Woodlands, where he'll be presenting a session on the value you can gain from integrating your completions and commissioning systems with other project management tools. So we're going to take advantage of this opportunity and have him as our special guest speaker at our breakfast seminar on November 5. Now this is going to be a great session where it's going to be interactive, and you won't want to miss that. He is really a great speaker and his experience is invaluable. All right, so thank you for attending today. We appreciate the time and effort it takes to set aside an hour for a webinar. We thank you for your questions. Please keep visiting our website, www.omega.no/US, for all the latest news and upcoming events so you don't miss out on any future topics. We would be grateful if you would complete the survey at the end of this webinar, as it gives us useful feedback. And if you need to contact me at any time, there's my email address. So I look forward to having you join us in October when we focus on completions and commissioning. Thank you again.